Good evening. Welcome to Community and Technology, where we connect the global community with news, information, and resources. I'm Stu Reed, here with my co-host, Dave Burstein.
Hello.
Hey, Dave, how you doing, man?
I'm doing real well, and I got lots of interesting news. I
Yeah.
even know what's happening. The show's going to play next Wednesday, by which time I will actually have seen Avatar. But I've seen enough already and read enough that I can give you a review of the movie, and it's definitely going to be worth going to.
Okay.
Uh, but I think since we've been talking so much about Elon Musk, and I've got a few more things for him, we might as well start with that because that's what everybody wants to hear.
Yeah,
Good thing.
I understand that he recently, I think just this past week, made an appearance with Dave Chappelle at a live event and
And what happened?
he got booed mercilessly.
Absolutely. And people are really starting to hate Musk, uh, partly with cause. I must say that the Tesla car was a total breakthrough, and
Hmm.
SpaceX is a total breakthrough, and he deserves credit for both of those. But at the moment, he seems like a crackpot
Yeah.
running around with people who are not sympathetic with most of the people in America, although they did get a fair number of votes. Uh, he really turned me off. Uh, did you see what he said about Fauci?
No, what did he say? I mean, I know it's something negative, but I didn't really get the details.
Okay, a lot of people, mostly young people, are putting into to their bios the pronouns they like.
Hmm.
He, him. Some people are she, her, and a lot of people, surprisingly many, are they, which is why it's being done to give people the option of saying the non-binary.
Hmm.
Okay, so Musk thought he was being funny. He put in, my pronouns are persecute Fauci. Now, Tony Fauci is one of the most respected physicians in the United States for the last 50 years. He just retired. I met him back in the 80s when he was leading the response to AIDS. And he was thoughtful, intelligent, compassionate, and obviously smart as heck.
Hmm.
He made the sensible suggestion that we do everything practical not to spread COVID. COVID has gone wild.
Yeah.
The number of deaths per day has gone up from the 200s to the 400s, and the trend is up.
Mm.
That's in the US. And in China, where they eased a lot of their restrictions, the hospitals don't know what to do with all the patients.
Wow.
COVID is really serious. China managed to put in incredibly tough regulations that worked. They had, oh, 1,000th of the number of cases as the United States had, even
But a
though it
serious
started.
lockdown. I mean, they locked down whole communities and cities.
We're talking about Shanghai and Beijing, 15 million people who couldn't leave their house for a week,
Mm.
and mandatory quarantines in hotels, and lots of things like that.
Mm.
Is that right? Is that wrong? Well, the New York Times clearly thought it was wrong. All the reporters, all they could report for weeks was how people were protesting in China because the lockdowns were too much. That may be the right choice. And eventually the Chinese decided to go with that. But it's not at all obvious. A million people dying is a lot. So that what we did in the United States, which was minimal lockdowns, recommending you wear a mask, oh, how god awful, and that you get vaccinated,
Mm-hmm.
is, if anything, too little a response. Most doctors think compulsory vaccination would have been the right thing and would have saved hundreds of thousands of lives, literally hundreds of thousands. So to turn around and say the guy who was leading that effort was too strict, that they resulted that the lockdowns were out of bounds, That is somebody who has no understanding of the issues. None.
Yeah, I didn't get Musk's joke. What was he trying to say with persecute Fauci? Was that I
He
missed the
joked by saying
nuance.
it's his pronouns. Instead of saying his pronouns are he and him,
Uh-huh.
was a joke that he put in the something that had nothing to do with pronouns.
I see. Okay.
Persecute Fauci. But persecute Fauci is just wrong.
Yeah.
You can argue about some things, whether the boosters are necessary for people under 50, for example. There's things that reasonable people disagree about. But there's no question that the US response was not crazy,
So what do you
which is
think
what
Musk
he
is
said.
doing, Dave? You think Musk is just flailing, looking for support from the far right, from the fringe, because he's like lost so much of the mainstream support? Is that what he's doing?
I don't know the man, but I know enough not to trust him.
Hmm.
I know he's been doing things at Twitter that have led to a whole lot of people to look for alternatives. Reed Hunt was the US FCC chair a while back.
Hmm.
He decided to stay on Twitter. I'm also staying on Twitter, although 1 million people moved to Mastodon. He said instead of moving to Mastodon, although I think he said took his name there, he said just boycott all the Twitter advertisers. That will have more impact than leaving.
Hmm.
And what's the impact of leaving? 1 million people have signed up to Mastodon, but one survey said only 1.6% of them have left Twitter because there's no good way to take your followers with you.
Right, we
So
talked
you
about
have
that
to
last week.
build them all up, and
Hmm.
most of them aren't on Mastodon in the first place. Press is also getting one, which is a Mastodon. Actually, I don't think it's a Mastodon deployment. That's about to go live. It's still in beta. There are plenty of alternatives, but the audience is at Twitter. Well, I'm not going to boycott Elon Musk at this point. I'm going to respect him for what he did right. But oh, do I not think he is a reliable source for anything?
Hmm.
He eliminated the entire crew who tried to keep horrible and hate speech off Twitter. And there's loads and loads of reports that it's just run wild. Not good.
Yeah.
Not good.
Do you think the advertiser boycott is going to work? I've read that some advertisers have pulled back and have suspended their accounts with him, at least temporarily. Do you have any sense of
Well,
that's going to have an impact?
if you were Procter and Gamble, do you want to be next to a vicious, racist, anti-Semitic statement on Twitter?
Absolutely not.
And that's what about half the advertisers decided. The one
Mm-hmm.
who didn't was Apple,
Mm.
who's the biggest advertiser. Talked about he actually had cut back before, but that happened before Musk. And Musk and the CEO of Apple met. Their advertising is back, and Musk is not going to fight the Apple tax, 30% of everything you do on your cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
The Apple and Google tax is one of the ugliest things that is really driving up the cost of being on the internet. There ought to be a law.
Wait, who pays that tax, Dave? The Apple and the Google tax. Break that down for our listeners.
And if you buy anything, including Twitter itself, if you download the app and agree to pay the $11 a month that Musk is asking, Apple gets 30% of that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
One
Apple
one
is
time,
now
one time or ongoing?
all the time, forever.
Wow.
Epic Games is in court against Apple. The Korean and Indian governments have said it has to be eliminated.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like the Europeans are going to say the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we just haven't because, well, I don't know that we're a democracy anymore. There's an awful lot of power that goes along with the money.
Mhm.
And Apple is a $2 trillion company. Google is $1.5 trillion. And anybody who wants to change anything there is fighting against $4 trillion of power. And oh, do they and Facebook and Microsoft swamp Washington and Brussels with
Mhm.
lobbyists.
Mhm. So you
Uh,
said Musk is supporting and upholding of that tax.
he complained about it. He said it was unreasonable. Apple said, well, we have $100 million worth of advertising. He and Cook met. Apple ads are back, and he's going to pay the tax. At least he's not going to personally fight it.
Mhm.
So Musk, good copy. Unfortunately, many of the things he's doing do not earn respect. There's much better news out there.
Yeah, like give us some, Dave.
Okay. Uh, Everybody in New York City is going to be able to access at least 100 megabytes upstream, and many of them probably close to a gigabit upstream over the next 3 years. That's because Charter Spectrum has committed to upgrading, which we've been talking about on this show for 2 years
Mhm.
and saying it was a no brainer. I was saying it was a no brainer because my friends at Cisco told me you could do it for less than $200 a home. Charter has now figured out it's going to cost them about $100 a home
Mhm.
to upgrade their 55 million homes.
Mhm.
Some idiots on Wall Street dumped the stock yesterday because of that mistake. Again, I'm taping this a week ahead of the time you're going to hear it. Because the investment in upgrading is going to more than pay for itself and satisfy customers. The short termism.
Mhm.
Comcast had already made the same decision. Between Comcast and Charter, that is at least 80% of the homes in the United States will all have 100 megabits upstream. And it is ridiculous to spend billions of dollars, as NTI intends to, upgrading anywhere there's cable, because the cable companies were going to do it without any subsidy. That's one of the good pieces of news. Same
Oh, a
thing
quick
goes.
question, Dave. Before you move off that subject, what the heck can you do with 100 megabits upstream? I mean, if you're broadcasting from your house, okay, you're broadcasting.
No, broadcasting is sitting there at 4 to 15 megabits. You can get two 4K videos in and four HD videos, 50 megabits. How
Hmm,
often do you actually use more than 50 megabits?
I don't think ever.
Well, I downgraded because there
Mhm.
was no reason to pay for the 200 that I had.
Mhm.
I got it because I needed the 20 upstream. Jenny does video. We actually needed a lot. And Jenny is going to really welcome the 100 megabits or more upstream that she's going to
Yeah, well,
get.
she moves large video files around, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
big video
yeah. This is
files.
Jenny Dave's wife, for maybe some new listeners who don't know. She's a quite an accomplished video producer and moves some of her video files and programming around over the internet.
That's one of the reasons. There are two other common applications. People who do a lot of downloading, of which there's some, but frankly, I don't see any reason to spend my tax dollars to help people download faster.
Hmm.
And the only thing most people can do with it, they can run speed tests and brag to their neighbors that they're running faster.
Yeah, mine is bigger than yours. Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no practical use. The EU hired a friend of mine in Paris to try to explain how they get more people to buy the gigabit service because they're going to give almost everybody a gigabit there
Hmm.
on fiber. There's no reason for anybody to buy a gigabit today, and there probably won't be for 5 years and maybe not even in 10, because the amount of data going across the internet has slowed down dramatically, or the growth has slowed down dramatically.
Mm.
Because right now, most people are watching all the video that they could possibly watch in 24 hours a day and
Mm.
also have a life.
Okay.
So that's slowed down. Now, I have run speed tests and I have gotten 400 megabits on the phone that's talking to you right now, passing the video up to the station
Mm-hmm.
on wireless. T-Mobile is using the mid-band 100 megahertz of spectrum they have and is now connected 260 million Americans of the 330 million Americans to mid-band, almost all of whom gets 100 megabits or more.
Wow.
I was getting 400 megabits on Central Park West.
Wow. And that's all.
Again,
This is wireless.
this is T-Mobile Wireless.
Mm-hmm.
This is something we've been talking about on this show for 5 years as coming,
Mm-hmm.
because I hang with a lot of the wireless engineers.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody knew this, except the people who want to waste $42 billion or half of $42 billion upgrading things that don't need it. In
Yeah.
particular, T-Mobile is going to be over 300 million people with 100 megabits down, 20 up, the standard for the subsidy program in the next 2 years. And of those, the United NTIA at this point is prepared to spend billions, maybe tens of billions, to upgrade them.
Mm.
Sure, fiber is great, but not with my taxpayer money.
Right. Mm-hmm.
There's a whole lot of people who are still dying outside of hospitals that don't have room for them, particularly in rural areas of the United States.
Still hungry, not eating.
Well, we
Still
got a
not
lot of
getting
food banks
educated.
in New
I mean,
York.
there's so many areas that are underfunded in this country.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So getting it to the 5% who may not be able to get it now, that may be worth spending some money on. But upgrading places where they have a perfectly fine connection for the next 5 or 15 years,
Mm-hmm.
total waste, the kind of thing you expect Republicans to oppose. But the Republicans haven't opened their mouths on any of this at the FCC or much in Congress.
Well, aren't they working for many of the big telcos and internet companies that are benefiting from this money?
You mean like Comcast?
Yeah.
Comcast is spending a fortune on Washington lobbying, including one of the ugliest lobbying deals I've seen in a while. They're trying to cut off Gigi Sohn from the FCC slot that she's been nominated for. They're spending tens of millions trying to block her because she is a strong consumer advocate.
Yeah, give us her name again, Dave. Say her name again.
Gigi Sohn,
Mm-hmm.
longtime consumer advocate. I know her well. She's even complimented something I worked on.
She's been in the queue for like over 6-9 months, hasn't she, to become an FCC commissioner?
And she's been being blocked by the phone companies and the cable companies.
Mm-hmm.
Ironically, she has support from a whole lot of people in places like cable and TV, the corporate types,
Mm-hmm.
including the key Disney lobbyist who was responsible for the Mickey Mouse Copyright Act. Very powerful lobbyist, supported her because everybody in Washington knows her, knows her to be hardworking, honorable, and actually happy to work with people when they disagree. So she's had a number of right wingers support her.
Mm-hmm.
But
so where's the blockage coming from? What is that about?
It's coming from the cable companies and the phone companies who don't want a strong person on it. Even if she is an honest, reasonable, thoughtful, well-informed person who works with people who disagree with her, including a lot of Republicans, they don't want somebody that strong.
Wow.
Not very welcome. But that's the level of money. Until you get close to it, we all knew that the phone companies, and Comcast copied them, had enormous power in Washington because they had a budget of 100 million plus every year. Google jumped in like that about 5 years ago. Google had more than 100 people in their Washington office. That's as many as we have senators, and I'm sure it's higher now. That's a number from 4 years ago. I was looking through, I connected with one of the Facebook lobbyists in Brussels at the EU. We had a very good talk. He's talking about why it's important to get speeds that can do virtual reality. And we went back and forth on what was really being built by the phone companies. Happy to talk to people I disagree with. I can learn from them too. So I went on to LinkedIn, and suddenly LinkedIn, as it does, showed me other people like him, lobbyists for Facebook in Europe. And in less than an hour, I found 30 of them. Yeah.
Wow.
Now, Apple is there. We talked a few minutes ago about the Apple tax, the 30% Apple and Google take from all the apps. Apple is very concerned that the Europeans may block that. They want to. It's clear that the EU wants to do that. So they've been jumping on. And they're getting trashed across Europe now because they're not playing by the rules. They're astroturfing, which is new for Brussels. They have an organization that said it was all about small businesses. Somebody found where their money came from. It wasn't small businesses. It was the biggest company in the world.
Wow.
Actually, Apple may not be the biggest company. Saudi Aramco has so much oil, they may be bigger, but it's up there.
It's up there. It's definitely top 10.
Okay. Yeah. When we come back from the break, I'm going to do something that's new for this show. We're called Community and Technology. We have the mandate to go anywhere in technology. And I'm going to start the precedent now that unless we have a guest that comes first, after the break, we're going to have some stories from science and technology that aren't computers, but are worth recording after the break.
Okay, yeah, that's some fascinating stuff. Looking forward to that. This is Community and Technology with Dave Burstein and Stu Reed. You're listening to WHCR 90.3 FM. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after a brief musical break.
Every gal strutting with her bow through the streets covered white with snow. Happy smiles everywhere you go. It's Christmas night in Harlem. People are feeling mighty good in that good old neighborhood. Yeah, and now be it understood. Christmas night in Harlem. Oh, everyone is gonna sit up until after 3. Everyone, we be all lit up like a Christmas tree. Oh, come on now, every Jane and Joe, greet your sweet, neat the mistletoe with the kiss and the hidey-ho. Christmas night in Harlem. Gonna sit up until after 3. Everyone be all lit up like a Christmas tree. Come on now, every Jane and Joe. Greet your sweet niece to mistletoe with a kiss and a hidey-ho. Christmas night and all of them. Oh, what a night in Harlem. Oh, come on now, every Jane and Joe. I greet your sweet niece to mistletoe with a kiss and a go, go, go.
Okay, we're back. Community and Technology with Dave Burstein and Stu Reed. Dave promised before the break that we talk about some non-computer story that's going on. Dave, what's up?
Well, it is big news, but it's wildly misinterpreted. Yesterday, they announced that one of the U.S. national labs had created a fusion experiment that actually created energy net.
Mm-hmm.
Up to now, all the fusion work, and we're talking 50 years of research, has taken more energy to create the fusion than the fusion pile produced.
Mm-hmm.
So they now are over break even. That's a major advance.
So Dave, before you go forward, just break down briefly for our listeners the difference between fusion and fission and why fusion is such a potentially better process.
Fission is a problem because the radioactive stuff they use is dangerous as heck.
Mm-hmm.
We know what happened in 3 Mile Island and Fukushima, and anybody intelligent knows blow-ups happen, and the radiation in fission reactors could be very dangerous. It's still not safe to go to Chernobyl.
Mm-hmm. Now, fission is the breaking apart of atoms, is that right? Whereas fusion is the coming together that creates energy.
Yeah. Fission, which is what the first atom bomb is that destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki, uses relatively large atoms, uranium 235, 238, which is the number of protons and neutrons. It breaks apart, and along the way of the break apart, it releases enough energy to kill 50,000 people in the one public demonstration. Almost everybody on Earth, if the US and Russia went at it. There really are enough nuclear weapons to virtually wipe out humanity. Let us pray it doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
To whatever God you believe in, or don't. Fusion is a different kind of process. It takes 2 hydrogen atoms, forces them together, and again, when forcing them together, it generates energy. That's what a hydrogen bomb is. And the advantage of it is, what comes out of it is things like hydrogen, helium, water vapor, and so on. Fusion takes the surface of the sun up to tens of millions of degrees. That's how the sun works. We now managed to do an experiment at one of the national labs, may have been, I don't think it was Los Alamos, that created a hydrogen-controlled explosion that generated energy. And everybody was saying, great, we're going to have this safe, non-polluting source of energy. I've been hearing that for 30 years. In fact, the old joke around nuclear physics was fusion has been 30 years away for the last 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes to which you add, and it will still be 30 years away for the next 30 years. It may not. A lot of good scientists, as always have been, are very optimistic. It would be wonderful. It's absolutely worth the $10 billion or so the US, China, and Europe are spending every year, because the payoff would be so big. But to go from a very small controlled explosion that lasted for a few seconds to a fusion power plant that we could put up at Indian Point there is a whole lot of work that
Mhm.
hasn't been done and needs to
Mhm.
be done. So I will be delighted if in my lifetime there's fusion power, but I wouldn't put my money on it.
Yeah.
Although some are. Among other things, the Times reported that a lot of investors are putting money in the small companies that are trying to get somewhere on fusion. Do you remember cold fusion?
Yeah, I remember hearing about it. I don't think it ever happened, certainly.
It
Mhm.
probably never happened. But two reputable chemists said they had managed to produce a fusion reaction at room temperature in a particular solution. Because they were reputable chemists and people wanted to believe, it went all over the world. They solved the fusion problem.
Mhm.
This was about 30 years ago. Now, I took it seriously because one of the best physicists I know, Michio Kaku, happened to do a radio show right after the radio show I was doing.
Mhm.
And he came on that day with they've got fusion. He started talking about how it was going to be maglev trains and unlimited power. Turns out the chemists were fooling themselves. They didn't have it. Everybody tried to replicate it. There was loads of research for the next decade. They didn't have it. They had nothing. But
No, no,
people believe what they want
I
to
just
believe.
wanted you to break it down for us, Dave, the cold fusion versus what we just heard about. I read that they are bombarding some material and getting temperatures up to some multiple of the temperature at the core of the sun in order to produce this fusion energy. That's
No,
astounding.
it's astounding. It's remarkable. It's a big achievement. And it may well, maybe in our lifetime, I'm getting old these days, work well enough that we can replace all the fission reactors and
Let
all
me
the
ask you this.
coal.
I mean, I know you're not a physicist and you may not know, but how are we able to produce temperatures of that scale on Earth? That's some multiple of the temperature inside the sun. I mean, that it sounds like it couldn't be done on Earth.
Well, we know that an atomic bomb put enormous heat on Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Okay.
We know that the hydrogen bombs were literally 10,000 times as explosive.
Mm.
There is enormous energy in atoms that gets reduced if certain big atoms break apart or certain small atoms are put together.
Mm.
Uh, we're really a radio show, even though we've got the video. It's the curve of binding energy. Down here at hydrogen and helium, this is the energy in the atom. When you get up to carbon and things like silicon and iron, the energy in the atom is less. So what happens when you put two helium atoms together or two hydrogen atoms together and they make larger atoms that do not contain homophony? The energy goes, which is how the sun works.
Mm.
That was what Hans Bethe got a Nobel Prize for in 1938 at Cornell. He figured out that it was a fusion reaction in the sun. And ever since then, we've been chasing fusion reactions.
Mm.
So that what is behind fission and fusion is that atoms at the bottom and atoms at the top of the periodic table have more energy than what's in the middle.
Mm.
And when you pull something to the middle, by combining the low reaches the periodic table, or splitting the high reaches, it releases energy in a scale that scared Albert Einstein enough that he wrote the letter that talked Franklin Roosevelt into building the atomic bomb. Because Bethe had figured out that was what the sun was doing.
Mm-hmm. I don't know what Einstein wrote to FDR about that. Is that documented? Is that available
It's well
anywhere?
documented. It's all in the history.
Okay.
He wrote a letter introducing Leo Szilard, another physicist, to Roosevelt, and said, take this very seriously.
Hmm.
And then the United States started the largest engineering project in history, and
Manhattan
4
Project.
years later had a bomb.
Mm-hmm.
And 6 years after that, had a hydrogen bomb that was literally 1,000 times more powerful.
Hmm.
That's a piece of science that I'm glad to bring to the show. But I'm also bringing to the show the knowledge that there's a whole lot of work to do. It would be a pleasant surprise if it happens in my lifetime.
Yeah, yeah.
Probably in yours, because you're probably a lot younger than I am.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Dave. Thank you, Dave.
I'm talking to the audience.
Now, along those same veins, we're talking about manufacturing and scaling up and developing. You know, I saw a piece that you brought to my attention about how the Chinese are using metaverse technology in industrial applications, and they're hoping to seriously upgrade and advance what's going on in manufacturing using metaverse technology. What is that about?
There's a fantasy that people not born in the United States are by nature stupid and can't do good engineering or science. Maybe a few Europeans can match us. Heck, Fermi, who had a lot to do with the atom bomb, was Italian. And he had a Jewish wife. So he left Italy and came to the United States and helped build our bomb. That happened to a lot of people back then. The assumption by many people was that Facebook was going to build the metaverse. They changed the name of the company from Facebook to Meta. He's spending literally $10 billion a year trying to create this virtual reality and making a whole lot of noise. What hasn't been so obvious is that the metaverse is going to be very international. Last show, we talked about how the Koreans and the Japanese are working together.
Mm-hmm.
Korea Telecom and NTT in Japan. NTT is a $100 billion phone company. This week's story is how the big Chinese are coming in. Remember, China at this point is ahead of the United States in some things. Overall, they're a very strong number two. They're ahead of the United States in things like quantum encryption. They actually make some of the best NAND memory chips, the densest ones, using an American piece of equipment to make it, but they're making them in China. The Chinese are enormously capable. I've been reporting on China now for almost 20 years, and some of the things they've done are unbelievable. Some of the things they've done are also awful. But as somebody whose country is currently at war in, I don't know how many countries, certainly Iraq and Syria and Somalia, but there are a whole lot more where we have troops these days actively fighting. So I don't think Americans should be there criticizing the Chinese politics. The Chinese can and should criticize and change some things. So the Chinese government pushes science and technology ever since Deng Xiaoping 40 years ago. And they spend more on research and development than any other country except the United States. I think they spend more than all of Europe combined. They're going to build a metaverse. Will their metaverse be better than Facebook's metaverse? Nobody knows at this point. There's still so much to do to get a metaverse that's worth very much, that anybody who thinks they know what's going to happen is wrong. And the Chinese are saying, what are we going to do with this metaverse? What is a metaverse? Well, at the moment, you put on goggles from Facebook, and suddenly you're in three-dimensional space, seeing people in three-dimensional space. It makes great games. It could do much more. Probably will do much more, but not nearly as much as many people think. The Chinese are saying, okay, people die in mines. It's dark as a dungeon way down in those mines in Mr. Peabody's coal company. And the Chinese have had several major mine accidents in the last few years and made a significant number of people dying in them. So it makes sense to automate the mining, automate the machines, and control it from safely above ground. You certainly can do that with a virtual reality gear. Put up that rig, and there's a lot of people, including some serious researchers, who think that if you're seeing everything in 3D space, you can do a better job of controlling the mining machine, the race car, the surgical instrument, and the drones bombing the heck out of country after country now, including the Ukrainians and the Russians going at each other with drones. Did you see where the drones are coming from that they're using?
Is it
The
the
Ukrainians
US?
are buying them from Turkey.
Oh, Turkey,
US is
no.
deliberately not selling them, but
Really?
Turkey has built a perfectly functional drone with a several hundred-mile radius that the Ukrainians have had a lot of success on the battlefield. And the Russians threw every drone they had at the Ukrainians and started buying them from Iran, which also had built perfectly functional drones. So that's how you're seeing Ukraine hitting Soviet air bases hundreds of miles inside the Soviet Union. It's a Turkish drone they're using.
Well, but back to the metaverse, Dave. How and are and will the Chinese be using metaverse technology in industrial applications? I mean, the story I saw said that they're going to be able to kind of engineer and design stuff using metaverse technology and kind of share solutions and problem solving in groups in ways that couldn't happen in the real world. Is that real, or are they just speculating? They just talking?
It's clearly not real at this point. It's clearly something that a lot of people, including Mark Zuckerberg, thinks is going to happen. It certainly is going to happen some. But so far, people actually going into the metaverse have not found that kind of application outside of games. They're starting to do, and they talk a whole lot when they find applications that work. So they're starting to do things like training surgeons in a 3D simulation on simulated bodies. Instead of cutting up cadavers or killing patients in the hospitals they sent doctors to for the first couple of years. Mount Sinai was used to use Elmhurst Hospital in the United States to let their surgeons kill some patients before they let them work on any patients in Mount Sinai, for example.
Wow, thank you very much.
Wow. Columbia Presbyterian used Harlem Hospital. In fact, the old joke was if you wanted to get really great medical care, you walk into Harlem Hospital with an unusual disease, and then all the world-class physicians from Columbia will take a cab over in order to see this unusual disease. That, I'm sure, is apocryphal. Not that it wasn't the Columbia physicians controlling Harlem Hospital, but that you got a dozen of them coming if you had an interesting disease.
Now, you're talking about hospitals, Dave. I saw a piece that there's been a recent cyber attack on One Brooklyn Health in Washington, which includes 3 hospitals, the Interfaith Medical Center, Brookdale Hospital, and Kingsbrook Jewish Medical Center, where all of their patient care digital stuff got shut down, and they're now working with pencil and paper.
Pencil and paper and messengers going from the lab, bringing the results to the doctors who may have a patient on the operating table and they need the results right away. Today, that's all automated. The doctor on his portable computer or the computer in the operating room is able to see the lab results as soon as the lab has them. Now, they have to send it by messenger. This has been going on for a couple of weeks. computers have bugs. Nobody has said this more decisively than Vint Cerf, who put together TCP/IP and the internet, along with Bob Kahn, that he doesn't see any way to write software that doesn't have bugs. And so what happens is, because the software has bugs, fewer in good software, but Brookdale Hospital didn't have money to buy the best software or hire the best security experts. So their system was taken over for ransom, as happened to several hospitals in the United States, and is becoming common because the consequences of a hospital losing its communications are so severe that they literally will pay millions to get them back.
Yeah, life and death.
And what's happening now is that the ransom guys, who still go after people like you and me sometimes, are finding they make more money going after industrial things and hospitals, charging more, and they are actually investing in research to find the ways to crack people's system.
Wow.
Did you know fiber optic?
And what, a company, fiber optic?
No, that was his name. His real name was Markabine.
No.
Okay, he was part of the 2600 crowd. He was one of the most famous hackers 30 years ago.
Okay.
He got caught, went to jail. When he came out of it, my friend Emmanuel Goldstein, also the editor of 2600 magazine, picked him up from jail, brought him to New York, to the station, BAI, where Emmanuel had a show, and literally called in on a mobile phone as though they had a parade welcoming fiber back to New York, coming through the streets of Manhattan. Okay. Fiber was a fine hacker. What did he do 3 years later? He let himself be hired to break into systems, which he did through a Big 8 accounting firm who had clients who wanted to know whether they could break into systems. And I spoke to him 5 or 10 years later, and I asked him how it was going, and he said he hadn't found one that he couldn't break into yet.
Wow.
Now, security's gotten better, but hackers have gotten better. They go back and forth on that one.
Yeah.
And so, yes, be careful. Yes, have backups. I've had my website hacked 3 times. Well, one of my dozen websites. And it happens to everyone. And there is no security. You can have I in fact am running 2 anti-hacking programs on all my websites. And one of them managed to get hacked in the last year anyway.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, I'm not a security expert. I'm not as careful as I should be. So I'm not the one to say, oh, follow me and what I'm doing there. But I do know enough to know hacking is inevitable.
Yeah.
How much time do we have?
We're out of time, Dave. Got a minute left.
Okay, let me tell you in that 1 minute, we're taping this a week ahead. We haven't seen Avatar yet. The director is coming to town for a Q&A next week, which Jenny's been invited to, and I'm the +1. Avatar is a wonderful movie in many ways. It's true 3D. It's remarkable technologically. It is blowing away any computer graphics or any graphics you ever saw anywhere. The reviewers from people like The Hollywood Reporter did say, however, that the dialogue is weak and the plot is weak. The Guardian newspaper actually gave it only 2 out of 5 stars. So don't listen to the dialogue. Let's watch what's happening on the screen.
Don't go for the story, but look at what they're doing. Yeah.
Jenny and I are signed up for 2 previews, in fact, because I'm sure it's going to be worth it. But don't expect much good dialogue. The other one to see is called Oppie.
We look forward to
Uncle
hearing about that
has Mars.
in the next week or two, Dave.
You're going to hear
Okay.
it everywhere. It's going to be a very big movie.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you, Dave. And as we're going to be on the air next Wednesday, I want to wish all our listeners and viewers happy holidays. Stay safe, stay warm, and continue to listen to WHCR 90.3 FM. And please, we're not finished with our fundraising. Go to WHCR.org and contribute. And please mention community and technology in the memo line when you put in your very kind donation. We need it. We're trying to raise money for a new audio board. The one you see me behind me, those of you that are looking at the video, has gone on the blink, and we need to replace it. So please support community radio. This has been WHCR 90.3 FM, Community and Technology. Dave Bursey and Stu Reed. See you next week, every Wednesday, 5 to 6 p.m. Good night.